The alarm on the station tore through the corridor before I even opened my eyes. I was already moving. Years of training do that to a person. My boots hit the cold metal floor, and my hand found my jacket before my mind caught up with what was happening. Red light pulsed along the walls of the Calder station, washing over the strange metal architecture built by species older than anything humanity had ever touched. I was the only human on this deck. Actually, I was one of only 6 humans on the entire station, tucked into a corner of the galaxy where our species was still considered new, still considered small, still considered breakable. The other beings on this station were not like us. The Velatrans had skin that shimmered like glass and healed within seconds of any injury. The Doraxi could not even be cut by ordinary blades. Their bodies bent light around them like armor. Compared to them, humans looked fragile, slow, old-fashioned. And me, standing at nearly 6 feet, marked from shoulder to wrist with scars from a life they could not understand, was the favorite target of their jokes. I stepped into the hallway just as 3 Velatrans walked past, their smooth silver eyes catching the light. One of them, a tall one named Severin, looked at my arm, where a long faded scar ran from my elbow to my wrist. "Still wearing your wounds like decorations, Corwin?" Severin said, his voice light with amusement. "On Velitra, we would call that carelessness, or maybe just poor design." The others laughed, a soft musical sound that echoed down the corridor. I didn't answer. I never did. Words never mattered to people who had never bled for anything. The alarm cut through the laughter, sharp and urgent, and something in my chest went cold and still, the way it always did before something bad happened. "Security breach in Docking Bay 4, the ship's voice announced. "All personnel proceed to shelter zones immediately." Nobody moved with real urgency. Not the Velatrans, not the Doraxi. Most species on this station had never experienced true danger. Their wars ended centuries ago, replaced with treaties, technology, and comfort. They did not know how to be afraid, because fear required memory, and memory required loss. I did not have that luxury. I had both. I turned toward the docking bay instead of the shelter zones. Severin called after me, his tone mocking. "Where are you going, soldier? Fear finally caught up with your old bones?" I ignored him and ran. The corridor bent sharply toward the docking bay, lights flickering as something outside pulsed against the station's hull. I could hear metal groaning, could feel the vibration through my boots. Something was trying to force its way inside. By the time I reached the control room outside the bay, a small crowd had gathered, more curious than afraid. Through the reinforced glass, I saw the enemy ship attached to the outer hull like a parasite, its surface a dull, corroded black. Raiders. Scavenger ships that preyed on outposts too far from any real defense fleet. I had heard of them before, vicious opportunists who struck fast and vanished before any real resistance could form. The Velatrans and Doraxi around me whispered nervously, their calm shattered for the first time. None of them had a plan. None of them had ever needed one. "Get back," I said, stepping toward the control console. "This isn't your authority," snapped a Doraxi officer named Ilan, his voice edged with panic disguised as anger. "No," I said, already pulling up the schematics of the bay. "But I'm the only one here who has done this before." The bay doors trembled again, metal screeching under the pressure. Whoever was outside wasn't just trying to dock, they were trying to breach. "The hull integrity is failing," the station's voice reported. "Breach in 90 seconds. Ilan's eyes widened. 90 seconds until what? "Until they're inside," I said calmly, my hands moving fast over the console, rerouting power from unused sections of the station toward the bay's outer shielding. "And once they are, it won't matter how advanced your technology is. It'll matter how fast you can think." "And you can think faster?" Severin's voice came from behind me, no longer mocking, but uncertain. "I've had practice," I said. The screeching stopped for a moment, replaced by a deep metallic groan, and then silence, the kind of silence that meant something worse was coming. "They're cutting through manually," I muttered. "That means their systems are old, which means we can outthink them." "How do you know that?" Ilan asked. "Because I fought people like this before humanity ever left our solar system," I said. "Different weapons, same desperation." The crowd behind me shifted uneasily. For the first time, they weren't laughing. The outer door groaned again, this time bending inward slightly. My mind raced through options, calculating angles, escape routes, points of resistance. This was not new to me. This was old, familiar, and terrifying in the way that only truth can be. "There," I said, pointing to a maintenance shaft above the bay. "If they break through, that shaft leads directly above the breach point. If I can get up there before they enter, I can trigger the emergency vent system and cut off their oxygen flow before they get a foothold." "That is insane," Ilan said. "You would be trapped in an enclosed space with intruders." "I know," I said, already moving toward the ladder. "Corwin," Severin said, his voice unfamiliar without its usual arrogance, "you don't have to do this." I paused just long enough to look back at him. "Yes, I do, because none of you know how." I climbed. The metal ladder rattled beneath my hands as I ascended into the narrow shaft above the bay. The air grew thinner, tighter, filled with the smell of hot metal and old dust. Below me, I could hear the bay doors finally give way with a deafening crash, followed by heavy footsteps and mechanical growls. I moved fast, years of instinct guiding every motion. My hands found the vent control panel exactly where the schematics had shown. Through the thin grating beneath me, I could see shapes moving into the bay, armored figures with weapons raised, scanning the room with mechanical precision. I closed my eyes for 1 second, just one, and let the old memories rise, not to relive them, but to use them. Every battle I had survived had taught me one truth: panic kills faster than any weapon. Calm is armor no scar can match. I opened the vent system. A rush of pressurized gas flooded the bay below, disorienting the intruders instantly. Not enough to cause them permanent harm, but enough to slow them, confuse them, buy time. "Now!" I shouted down through the vent, my voice echoing through the metal. "Seal the inner doors." Ilan, still frozen at the control console, hesitated only a moment before slamming his hand onto the emergency lockdown switch. The inner doors slid shut with a heavy clang, trapping the intruders within the disoriented haze of the bay, cutting them off from the rest of the station. The station's automated defense systems, now given enough time to properly activate, surged to life, subduing the trapped intruders without a single shot fired from any of the terrified crowd still gathered outside. It was over in less than 4 minutes. I climbed down from the shaft slowly, my body aching in ways that reminded me I wasn't as young as I used to be. The moment my boots hit the ground, the crowd around me fell silent. Nobody laughed this time. Severin approached first, his silver eyes wide with something I hadn't seen from him before. Respect, maybe, or fear, perhaps both. "How did you know what to do?" he asked quietly. "Because I've done it before," I said, more than once. Before he could respond, a new presence entered the room, and the air itself seemed to shift. She moved like calm water through chaos, tall and regal, her presence commanding silence from every being around her. I recognized her instantly, though I had never seen her this close before. The queen of the Doraxi hive, a being whose age was measured not in years but in centuries, whose authority stretched across a dozen star systems. The crowd bowed instinctively. I did not out of disrespect, but because I did not yet understand what was expected of me in this moment. Her eyes, deep violet and endlessly old, moved past the frightened crowd and landed directly on me. "You are the one who stopped the breach," she said. Her voice was steady, layered with something ancient and unreadable. "I am," I said simply. She stepped closer, ignoring the murmurs of her own advisors who clearly found this improper. Her gaze lowered to my arm, to the long scar that Severin had mocked only hours earlier. "This," she said, gently touching near the mark without actually making contact, "is not what my people believe it to be. And what do your people believe it to be?" I asked. "Weakness," she said plainly. "Failure of design. A flaw in the body that should have been corrected." I said nothing, waiting. "But I have lived long enough to remember when my own people believed differently," she continued. "Before healing became instant, before perfection became our only goal, there was a time when scars were sacred among us too." The room was utterly silent now, every being present hanging on her words. "Tell me," she said, looking directly into my eyes. What war gave you this? I hesitated, old memories rising like smoke. A war on my homeworld, I said, before we ever reached the stars. My people fought each other before we learned to fight together. I was young. I did not choose that war. It chose me. And this one? She asked, gesturing to a scar along my collarbone. A different fight, I said. Years later, a rescue mission that went wrong. I carried someone out who could not carry themselves. This is what it cost me. And did they survive? She asked. Yes, I said quietly, because I did not stop moving. Her violet eyes studied me for a long moment. Then she turned to face the crowd, her voice carrying easily across the silent room. You call these marks weakness, she said, addressing Severin and the others directly. You laugh at what you do not understand, because your kind has forgotten what it means to sacrifice something in order to protect something else. Severin lowered his eyes, saying nothing. This human did not run when danger came, she continued. He did not wait for a stronger species to act first. He remembered what fear taught him, and used it as a weapon instead of letting it control him. That is not weakness. That is mastery. She turned back to me, her expression softening slightly. Among my people, long before we became what we are now, warriors carried their wounds openly. Each mark told a story of survival, not failure. We called it the language of endurance. It seems your people still speak it, even without knowing its name. I did not know how to respond to that, so I simply nodded. You will be recognized, she said, not as a lesser being tolerated on this station, but as one who understands what true strength requires. Murmurs spread through the crowd, but none dared object. In the days that followed, everything changed. The mockery stopped, replaced first by curiosity, then something closer to respect. Severin, of all people, approached me one evening, in the station's common area, his usual arrogance replaced by something quieter. I did not understand, he said. I thought scars meant your species had not yet reached true advancement. I did not consider that they might mean something else. Most people don't, I said, until they need someone who has one. He looked down at his own unmarked hands, smooth and untouched by any hardship. We have never had to fight for anything, he admitted. Everything was given to us. Peace, comfort, perfection. I did not realize what that cost us until now. It's not too late to learn, I said. He nodded slowly, something shifting behind his silver eyes. Weeks passed, and the station returned to its normal rhythm, but something fundamental had changed beneath the surface. I was no longer the outsider mocked in quiet corners. Beings from different species began seeking me out, asking questions about my past, about the wars my planet had fought, about what it meant to carry visible proof of survival instead of hiding it. The Queen visited the station one final time before departing for her home system. She found me alone in the observation deck, staring out at the stars that stretched endlessly beyond the reinforced glass. You carry more than scars, she said, standing beside me. I carry what's left after the fighting stops, I said. The scars are just proof that I was there. In my language, there is a word we no longer use, she said. It means one who remembers the cost of peace. We forgot that word when we forgot what conflict felt like. Maybe that's not entirely a bad thing, I said. Maybe forgetting pain means you've finally found peace worth protecting. She studied me for a long moment. Perhaps, but peace without memory is fragile. It shatters the moment danger returns, because no one remembers how to face it. I thought about that for a while before answering. Then maybe that's why my people still have scars, I said. Not because we haven't reached your level of advancement, but because we haven't forgotten what protecting something actually costs. She nodded slowly, something like understanding passing between us. I will carry this lesson back to my people, she said. Perhaps it is time we remembered as well. Before she left, she extended her hand toward mine, an unusual gesture for her kind, one typically reserved only for equals. I took it without hesitation. You are not what my advisors expected from your species, she said. But you are exactly what this galaxy needs to remember. And what's that? I asked. That survival is not measured by how unmarked you remain, she said. but by how many wars you were willing to endure for something worth protecting. With that, she departed, her presence leaving behind a silence that felt different than before, heavier with meaning rather than mockery. Months later, humanity's standing among the galactic community shifted in ways few had predicted. Word spread of what happened on Calder Station, not as a story of violence, but as a story of endurance, of quiet strength, recognized by a being few dared question. I never sought recognition. I never wanted praise. All I ever wanted was to be judged by what I had survived, not by how I looked while surviving it. Sometimes, late at night, I still trace the scars along my arm, remembering each story they represent. Not with shame, not anymore, but with quiet acceptance. They laughed at my scars once, dismissing them as flaws, as evidence of weakness in a galaxy obsessed with perfection. But an alien queen, older and wiser than any of them, looked past what my skin showed and saw what my spirit had endured. And in that single moment of recognition, everything changed. Not because I proved anything to her, but because for the first time in a long while, I no longer needed to prove anything to myself.